Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Monday Morning Motivation. My name is Janine, and I'm very excited to have Julian with us today. Julian, I have known Julian in Shanghai now for a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years. That's when we met probably 3 years even, when we met in person for the first time. And I always perceive Julian as very active. He knows a lot of answers to a lot of questions. He's constantly helpful. So that's why I invited him to come and speak with us here. And I'm very excited that he's going to share learnings from an entrepreneur. But let me tell you this, we're going to cover a lot of different topics. Before we jump into this, and I'm handing over to Julian, in case you are new to Monday Morning Motivation, we are a community that is now 2 years old. We have 2,500 members all over China, a few people from abroad, and we're basically a community with like-minded people who want to stay positive, be motivated and inspired when starting the new day and week. And this is our amazing lineup for this month. And in case you guys have nothing else to do, feel free to join us tonight at 7 o'clock. My co-founder, colleague, Maria, and also our amazing trainer, Adrian, and I, we will give a webinar about good to great. Going to be very interactive. And in case you love what we do, MMM is a free community, but feel free to donate if you want to give also 50% to the 1 Million Tree Project. So they basically plant trees in Inner Mongolia. If you miss a webinar, no problem, we got you covered. And last but not least, if you want to become a MMM member, MMMM, 4 M's, we can provide you with more than 1.5 years of webinars and great discounts to our language partners, health products, health and coaching and business and so on. Whew. Okay, with no further ado, yes, we still have our amazing book if you need a nice present. And now I would say, Julian, I'm going to hand over to you. The stage is yours. And guys, you can ask Julian lots of questions after this 20-minute session. Julian, how about you start with a little introduction about who are you?
So my business partners and I are involved in finance and investments and related consulting. And we mostly invest in traditional assets like stocks and funds, but we also invest in some small to medium-sized businesses. So I'm constantly meeting with founders, meeting with people that have an opportunity, meeting with related industry professionals or people that know these people and this kind of thing.
Okay, and maybe you can also quickly add where you're from originally, because people are always interested in it. And how long have you been in China?
I've been in China almost 13 years, and I'm from the US.
Okay, good. Now, guys, we're going to have a conversation today, and I'm going to try to ask lots of good questions because we're going to cover lots of topics. And the interesting thing is, so yeah, I had met Julian a longer time ago, but then I constantly see him on WeChat. And I was like, people always ask questions. Julian is always helpful and he's trying his best to reply. And his answers and his connections and whatever tips he's giving, I felt like, ooh, they're really helpful actually. But how does he do this? How can he be on WeChat all the time? He's running his own business and he's there helping people, sometimes even liking some moments. Like, I'm always overwhelmed with WeChat. How do you do that? What are your tips when handling WeChat or the relationship with your phone, for example?
I think that relates to the scheduling. And so it's like you'll see that I'll like a bunch of your things all within 10 minutes of each other, because once or twice a day I look through the WeChat moments. You know, a couple of times a day I look through the recent WeChat history. I'm not that good at it. I do have a lot of unread messages. But if you're always on your WeChat, how can you get anything done for your work? That doesn't work. And the problem is that there's this business relationship with your WeChat. So we know what that's like. That you're going to be contacting some business people and doing some business with your WeChat too. But in general, about scheduling, I'm trying very hard to schedule like 1 or 2 days a week for meetings outside and a couple of days a week to deal with paperwork and to deal with other things that need to get done. And I'm trying to be careful about where I'm scheduling things to be, because if I can get everything in the same area, then and 2 or 3 or 4 meetings or things to do in the same area, then it makes it a lot more productive. But if you're having one meeting outside, that wastes a good part of the day. I mean, if you think about, you have a lunch meeting outside, the meeting's for an hour, and you got to get there, you got to get back and get out, and you might even be even less productive than that if you, let's say it's 11:30 and your meeting's at 12:30, but you don't have time to start on more work.
Very good tips. And I'm sorry, now you just got added to 5 new WeChat or 4 more.
Yes, I saw that.
So Julian is in all of our 5 WeChat groups. So if you want to connect with him, Julian was actually one of the first people when we started MMM. He is literally originally in the #1 WeChat group since the start. So he is an original. Thanks for sharing the first tips with us on the scheduling. Now, let's talk a little bit more about, do you have some tips for entrepreneurs, or when it comes to, let's say, foreign entrepreneurs in China, or even, let's say, Chinese who want to do business with foreigners?
First, I would say that if you're a foreign entrepreneur, there is not usually, depends on your industry, but usually there's not a need to have a Chinese co-founder. But if you have a Chinese co-founder or Chinese staff, I think that the cultural differences in business can be apparent very quickly. And that, in some cases, staying true to your values and your business values is important, because you're not going to just give up and do things all in the Chinese way. And increasingly, more and more customers and clients will appreciate that. But as to you getting along with your employees or co-founders, I think it partly depends on experience, because if they lack experience of working with foreigners, this is going to be a greater issue. Also, I think we're generalizing foreigners together. And, take something like being late for a meeting. Some people, depending on where they're from or depending on their habits or things like this, are always late, and other people aren't. And it's not really, a foreign or a Western thing. It could get more detailed than that. But both parties have to bring something useful to the table if you're talking about a co-founder, no matter where they're from. Just because they're a local person, that's not enough to partner with them.
Very good sharings. Now, this brings us to the next topic, and I think this fits really well. Like career transition. I remember you told me that, a lot of your friends, they constantly tell, I wish I could have opened my own business. It was one of my dreams. But now, I have a wife, I have children, family to take care of. or I'm already a senior, I have a senior position in my company, or I'm too old, or I don't have an idea, or I don't have an investor, not the money, and so on. So let's talk a bit more about the career transition.
Well, I think that you need to do what you can do to minimize that risk. Whether that means trying to get your first few clients, means they paid, but getting your first few clients, whether that means, you know, developing enough materials and enough information to get your prototype, whether that means getting customers to give you a deposit for a product, or doing something so that you can somewhat prove your business model to a small extent. And that will take out some of the risk of doing it. But a lot of people have said that life just sort of gets ahead of them.
That's that's true. Now, last time, like this morning, I was also asking about investments. I think a lot of us, we're actually not either no real like finance brains, or at least some, like I'm not one of those. Some of us, yeah, I guess Chinese people, a lot of them are really good in finance topics. Maybe that's a stereotype though. But like some of us are interested in like investing in something, investing in stocks, in bonds, in maybe in more apartments or different kind of assets. Like what are your tips that you can share with us? Like how can we get started when we're actually not experts but we want to invest in something? What are the first steps, or what should we watch out for?
I think that there are a couple of general ideas. First being that diversification is important. You don't want to put all your money into one thing, like not all in real estate or not all in stocks or not. The other thing to remember is that the bank is not giving you that much money for interest. Used to be back in the 1980s and 1990s, the bank gave you a lot of money, 10, 12, 15%. So it was good to have your money in a savings account. But these days, the bank is barely giving you anything in a savings account, and inflation is pretty high. Inflation in the US apparently is said to be around 3%. Inflation apparently is 3%, but many experts believe it's more in China. And inflation is the buying power. When you have your money, how much you can get for it. You can see this very commonly if you've been in China long enough, that the price of your haircut has changed, for example, because it's not necessarily that the cost has changed, but just how far your money gets you has changed. And we have to remember that investments don't always go up. So if you're investing in stocks, American stock market averages 8% to 10% per year. That's an average. That means that it's going to go down some years. It's going to go very far up some years. And to some extent, there's going to be a cost to making money. If you're investing in real estate and you are renting out the property, and all of the rental money is not yours. You're going to have to pay for maybe a mortgage. You're going to have to pay for insurance. You're going to have to pay for other expenses before you have what you're actually taking home, which isn't bad. You just have to consider those other expenses. But in some way, it depends also on your risk tolerance of your interests. If you're going to do small business investing, it depends a lot more on trust, because those are founders just like yourselves that started a business, and you're believing in what they started, compared to a public company that's, a large company, usually famous, that has stocks that you can just publicly buy from a bank or a finance institution.
Very good sharings. Yeah, especially with trust. It's so difficult to gain. And yeah, it's not really like measurable compared to these big companies, for example, where you have all the numbers.
You have the numbers, you have the charts, you have the data, you have the news. The big companies, you can make a calculation as compared to small business investing.
That's true. Now, let's talk about work-life balance.
I think that much like with the WeChat scheduling comments, it's important to have some time for yourself. And that could be like not scheduling late nights to work every night. I noticed that you don't schedule an event or a webinar every night, or you shouldn't schedule late night calls, to different countries every night. However, when I guess before you asked me about the 996 thing, that doesn't mean it's efficient or productive. That just because you're working or working hard or working late doesn't mean it's efficient or productive. And in a lot of respects, we live in a society that wants to reward people based on effort, or this belief that everybody gets an award kind of like participating. But, that doesn't mean that people are productive or that people are efficient or that people really did well at something. In a lot of situations, there could be winners and losers. Or I don't want to say winners and losers, there could be people that exceeded the average.
Good. Now, let me get back to a question that was asked in the 7 o'clock call. Somebody wanted to know, is there a nice story between or behind your company name?
Oh,
Panda Eagle.
I was just trying to show international business, some sort of thing between multiple countries without offending anybody. So I figure the animals gets at the two core countries, and nobody can say it's offensive or anything, and some people think it's cute.
Nice. We also had a question this morning. Somebody wanted to know, how or where can I find more clients if I want to start my own company?
I think that in a business to consumer model, unless you have a very general business like you do, Janine, that could apply to almost everybody, it's very difficult to find clients. And the acquisition cost is very expensive, especially in China, whether that be in terms of money or time. The internet can be useful, like in various WeChat groups or on public accounts to show your knowledge. But in general, that doesn't necessarily produce great results. So in general, a business to business model will take you longer to close the deal, but the deal will be for more money and will be for a longer period of time. Not easy, but depends on your industry.
Exactly. And then another person was also asking, if I want to start my own company and I don't have the money, how can I still start my own company?
I think that, again, this depends on your industry, because a product, you're going to clearly need some more money than a service. But it's also about showing that you've done something. So there was a founder that said, oh, I have this business idea and the prototype cost $200,000. And I said, so why are you here? And they said, well, to get financing for it, well, firstly, a prototype costing that much for most industries or most businesses seems like an expensive prototype. I can only imagine how much the product is and whether there's enough demand for it. But on the other hand, is to some extent, it doesn't have to be much, but if you're trying to get it all outside financed, so the investor is going to take all of the risk, that doesn't seem very good either. So I think there's a balance. And if you have a service related business, I think that it's easier to build some clients first. And it also depends on your goals, because we're using entrepreneur and startup and this kind of thing to be like, I want to raise a lot of money for my business. I want to grow it really big and, sell out or IPO or whatever. But that's not the goal of everybody. Some people just want to make some profit and draw a salary from their company and have a little bit of profit in the company, and that's it. And there are plenty of businesses that could scale but don't because of it. And there are plenty of businesses that are not scalable that, the founder lives a decent life. They started a business. The business has some profit. They have a salary. Next. And that's okay for some people.
Awesome. Yeah, this goes back to self-awareness, knowing what you basically want, right?
And a lot of people don't know what they want or don't know themselves. And you can just look back to what people study in university. There's a quote unquote university college, which is like for those people who don't know what major they want to be in my university now. I was thinking, why do you need to take a college course to figure this out?
Very good. Okay, everybody. So I'm now opening the stage for your questions. Of course, there's no perfect answers, often no right and wrong. As you know, I really appreciate that Julian always has a lot of good answers that can inspire us and give us the first steps towards our goals. So Sebastian, you wanted to ask the first question. Feel free to, you are on mute, Sebastian. You have to unmute yourself.
Gosh, sorry, one of the basic things I forgot. I'm actually eating a late breakfast, so pardon. And that's one reason why I didn't join you the first part. So Julian, when I came in, one of the remarks you made, Julian, if I heard correctly, is that in China, acquisition cost is expensive. Would be interested in hearing more information, for example, compared to how expensive is expensive, number one. Number two, compared to other acquisition costs, are you talking about 10% more or 20% or what? So if you could just elaborate on that, appreciate that, Julian.
So if you're talking about a B2C business, there are a lot of people in China, but the consumer or customer has become more educated. So there are two factors. The consumer has become more educated. So if you're a foreign brand, you can't just say, well, I'm a foreign brand, and expect that you're going to get customers. That's a thing of the past. So the consumer knows a lot more about the brands. They know a lot more about what they want, and they're going to be more picky about this, if you will. But they equally go with their friends' decisions often too. So if you can get one, you could probably get five. And what I mean by the cost to acquire a customer, it's, you get revenue from each customer. You get income from each customer. Now, how much does it cost for me to get that customer? Whether it's advertising, whether it's holding an event, whatever that is supposed to mean, whether it's, Baidu or WeChat advertising or clicks or however we're going to do this, the method of doing it is not that important, at least for this topic. It will be in your business plan important, but the cost is high because in part it's not as simple as it was 100 years ago. We have so many distractions now. We have so many things we have to do now. We have so much technology in front of us. To get a few seconds of someone's time is difficult, and then to get them to remember you is more difficult. And word of mouth is great, but it's should be, I think, some icing on the cake. If your whole business is based on word of mouth, I guess you could be lucky, but it's not always the case.
Thank you. I hope this was helpful, Sebastian. And Housing, you also have a question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, you're unmuted.
All right. Hello, Julian. I'm Helsing Gray. I'm also an investor, and I can tell you have a lot of experience. I heard what you said and what you did not say. So, wow, you're legit. So my question for you is, actually, it's kind of a group of questions, but you can answer whichever you want because I want to go deep, but we don't have a lot of time. But in any case, 1, what's your business model? 2, how is it sustainable? 3, how did you start it? And 4, do you need licenses to work in your field in China?
Yes. Okay.
Wow,
so
love it.
That's basically asking, in summary, the business model. So the reason that we don't need special license to do this is because I'm not raising money. My business partners and I are putting in our own money to some startups and small businesses, and we're not raising money to do so. If we were raising money to do so, we would need a license because we'd be considered a fund. But I'm not touching other people's money. I mean, I am when, I get paid for something, but that's different because then it becomes mine. But if you wanted to invest in one of the companies we invested in, I would introduce you to the founder, and that's it. And you would give your money to the founder if you do your deal, and that's the end of it. If we were having a fund and we were raising other people's money, yes, then you need a license for that. The other point to your question is most of our investments are in traditional assets like stocks and funds and things like that outside of China. However, on the other hand, I think like with some of the answers to Janine's questions, it's about balance. So when you're doing the small business investing, you can't always invest in things that produce equity because there is going to be several years before you're going to be able to cash out, hopefully. There is a much higher risk with equity investments. You're going to want some investments that somehow produce some cash. Yes, I understand that there are fewer investments in the startup world that will routinely produce cash for the investor, but there are plenty of them. And it's about having a unique investment model. We are targeting later stage startups, so the risk is also less. The founders usually have a proven business model. They have revenue, maybe they have some profit, maybe they need help with some scaling their business or some other areas of their business, but these aren't idea stage things because that's very, very risky. Now, plenty of people in the idea stage will come talk to me. I'll give them some feedback, I'll give them some direction, but usually I will have a meeting like that with the preface that we don't usually do idea stage because it's very difficult to control the success of an idea stage project. and the chance of failure is very big. But if, you have, depending on your business, depends on how many clients is important. But if you have clients, you have some revenue, you have some profit, then the chance of my investment failing is slim. When, we will recommend some investments to friends or other people, depending on their situation. It's just an idea. It's not really a recommendation. Plenty of stuff I pass on to people, they say, no, it's not for me. Okay. But hopefully that answers your question. The problem with getting a fund license in China is I can't control the outcome. I can't control what the startups, how they're going to exit. I can't control what's going to happen. And, so, and also when you're doing a fund, it would only make sense if you're raising a lot of money. But, it's not that the startups necessarily need a lot of money. And I'm using the word startup sort of loosely because these are more later stage.
Got it.
Helsing, are you
Got most
satisfied?
of it. I got most of that. More questions are coming now, but I don't want to.
Well, you can connect
time,
with me. Ask Janine to introduce me.
I'll create a WeChat group between the two. Yes, Helsing will also be our speaker in September. I'm very excited about that. Lillian, you have a question as well. Feel free to unmute yourself. Hi, Lillian.
Hi, Jenny. Sorry, I am late. So I have one question.
Sure, please.
And I wanted to know if Julian wanted to build a company in China. So I am wondering how to build a new company in China to doing some business.
So I think it depends what industry and what business you're planning to do. And then you need a plan that, somehow, how are you going to get your clients? Where is your revenue going to come from? What are your running costs? How much money do you need to run until you're profitable? Things like that. But I don't think that it is necessarily related to China. You'd need to know these basic elements ahead of time and have backup plans.
Thank you, Julian. Okay, good question, Lillian. Anybody else who has some questions? Feel free to write it in the chat group or raise the hand, unmute yourself. Sebastian has another question.
Yes, Jillian, I thank you for the answer to my earlier question. However, I don't believe you actually answered my question. My question was quite specific. You made a comment which was, in China, acquisition cost is expensive. Am I correct, or did I misheard you?
It is. Yes.
Okay, what I'd like to know is, I'd like you to qualify that. I gave you two specific examples.
I mean,
how
I think you'd have to give some industry, and I could research the specific data.
Well, you make a general statement, right? You said acquisition cost is expensive.
Right. Right.
So I just like to, I like to know more. I'd like to know more about the reasoning behind that statement. Okay, if you like an industry, let's just pick IT, which is quite common these days.
The reasoning that acquisition cost is expensive, I think, has to do with alternatives that you take an industry like electric vehicles, and Janine mentioned the trees, so this came to mind. China is really promoting the electric vehicle thing and has high electric vehicle goals, but it's not that Tesla's the only EV company out there. There's several Chinese companies doing the same thing. There's, several traditional auto companies that are moving electric. So now when you have so many substitutes, now it's going to cost you more to be able to get that, customer. Imagine being in the grocery store and you're looking in the milk aisle, which is full of various types of milk and various types of milk substitutes, which they very carefully call milk, and place near the milk. And so I didn't say that it's cheap, or I don't mean to say it's cheap to acquire customers in other countries. It's a little bit cheaper depending on the country. But then this is where your business model comes in, because in the electric vehicle example, there are, like, some of the companies you have to charge the battery yourself. Some of them you only own the car and you can swap out the battery at service stations because you're just renting the battery. So in a business to business setting, usually, I think the acquisition cost is lower. But even you look at restaurants, it's a simple-ish, not simple business, but it's a business we all know of. People go out to eat all the time. And, getting your customers requires promotion, advertising, comments, the Yelp and TripAdvisor and Dianpings of the world now. It's a lot more to it than it used to be. But, you're in a place like Shanghai, and options for Chinese food, options for Western food, and you could even go more detailed than that. How many Cantonese places are near you in Shanghai? Probably many.
Yeah. So basically, what you've been saying, Julian, is just because there are more competitions or more competitors these days, therefore
it's harder to acquire
to
your customer because
but
back 100 years ago, there were very few forms of promotion and advertising, and people were more at home, so it was sort of simpler to acquire your customer. But now, where are you going to get my attention, and how are you going to keep my attention and remember you? Because there are just so many things that I see or experience throughout the day. It's sort of amazing when you think about it.
But the increase of competition applies not in China, but in other parts of the world.
Sure.
So therefore, if that's your main reason why you make that statement, the acquisition should be expensive all over, not just in China.
I didn't say it's cheap anywhere else. It just will be less in some other countries.
Right.
And also, the promotion or how you get your customer or how you get their attention is harder than it used to be.
Thank you.
Let me cap in. Yes, thank you. We have one more question and then we're running out of time now. Sorry. So John is asking, last question for today. What is other ways to market your service business besides WeChat to get wider audience in China?
For service, word of mouth is quite important. If your consumers are Chinese, They'll probably look you up on Dianping, which is like Yelp in China. And they'll probably check your points or your reviews or things like that there. A lot of people have had success with Baidu, how am I supposed to talk about this? Similar to the Google advertising thing, the clicks and the, however the search engines deal with this. There is a similar thing with Baidu. And if you're really good at picking your keywords and substituting those keywords, if some words are not getting that much traction, some people have done the KOL method and sort of hired an internet celebrity, but I don't know how good that is. I don't know. So much like in Western countries, there are equivalents to all of that here. I think that you need a plan, and it could be simple. You could offer, people some sort of discount if they successfully refer a friend or something like that, which could be a simple way to get more customers. Hopefully you're doing something that a lot of people need, then it will be easier to get more customers.
All right, Julian, thank you so much for all these amazing answers to so many of our questions. And before we are now all kicking off our Monday properly, I just want to share again these events. If you want to join my co-founder Maria and me tonight, we're going to have Good to Great, a webinar with our trainer Adrian Cahill from Australia. This is our amazing lineup also for this month. Next week, we're gonna have Jonas Wolf, a German entrepreneur based in Beijing, who's going to speak about unleash the entrepreneurial leader in you. So you can see we do not only have coaches and trainers here in this community. What else? If you miss a webinar, no problem. If you wanna donate, because you love what we're doing. As I said, we give 50% to the 1 Million Tree Project, and they grow trees in Inner Mongolia. Become an MMM member to always have access to all recordings and to get discounts with our partners. Yeah, and I think this is it. Julian, thank you so much again for being with us here this morning. And I look forward to exchanging more with you, to do more with you as well. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Have a beautiful Monday. Go out there, take all the opportunities, spread some positivity and inspiration. And we will see you next Monday or maybe tonight. Julian, thank you so much. Bye, everybody.